Ever get that feeling
Yeah.
that maybe everything is kind of connected?
Mm-hmm.
Or, just find yourself wondering about awareness. Like, what is it to be you?
Yeah, those big questions.
Exactly. And that's sort of the territory we're getting into today. We've got some really interesting sources.
Quite diverse ones,
Yeah.
actually.
So first, there's this piece, 10 Podcasts for Mystics, looking at a podcast with someone named Rupert. It talks about self-awareness, non-duality.
Sounds deep.
It does. And then, totally different angle, we have technical files from Hugging Face.
Ah, the AI side of things.
Yeah, like a blueprint for an AI model.
Yeah.
It's called FNet Base Fine-Tuned Gates STEPS-B, and we're looking at a specific point, checkpoint 720.
Okay, so philosophy meets code configuration.
Pretty much. So our goal, for you listening, is to unpack these. See what insights pop up when we put spiritual exploration next to, well, AI architecture.
It's quite the juxtaposition. On one hand, deep human introspection, and on the other, building systems to understand the external world very methodically.
Okay, let's start with Rupert's podcast then. The article says it's really focused on understanding the self.
Right, exploring awareness, the mind.
Yeah, and our connection to the universe. Or maybe the lack of separation. It suggests understanding this stuff leads to, like, peace and fulfillment.
And that leads directly into this idea of non-duality, I imagine.
Exactly. That seems to be the core concept.
Yeah, non-duality. The article frames it as this idea that, well, the separation we feel, me over here, the world out there, it's maybe not the full picture. It suggests there's a fundamental unity underneath it all, interconnectedness.
So it's not just some abstract thought exercise.
Apparently not, according to the source. It's presented as a path, a way to find more well-being by seeing past that illusion of separation.
Like your ocean waves analogy earlier. They look separate, but they're all just water.
Exactly like that. Individual appearances, but one underlying reality. That's the gist of non-duality as presented here.
Makes sense. And the podcast itself sounds quite interactive. Conversations, listener questions.
Which is always a good sign, makes it less theoretical.
For sure. But it all circles back to non-duality. So the takeaway for you, the listener, is maybe exploring this idea could bring some calm, contentment.
Which taps into something pretty universal, right? That search for meaning, for feeling grounded.
Totally. Okay, now for the gear shift. Let's talk about these technical files.
Right, the AI model configuration, a very different kind of understanding.
So we have this file, config.json. You call it a blueprint.
Yeah, or instructions. It sets up an FNet model, specifically one for sequence classification.
Sequence classification.
Yeah.
Meaning like text.
Most likely, yeah. Analyzing sequences of words, sentences. And this one's been fine-tuned for a task called STSB.
STSB, okay. And it's snapshot checkpoint 720.
Which just means it's a specific version saved during its training process. The config file tells us how it's built at that stage.
Okay, so break down a bit of what's inside for us non-coders. What does this blueprint actually tell us?
Well, you see things like hidden size, which is 768 here. Think of that as how much detail the model can hold internally for each concept.
Okay, richness of understanding.
Sort of. Then num hidden layers is 12. That's like the depth of its processing, how many steps it takes to analyze the information, more layers, potentially more complex patterns it can learn.
Got it. Depth and vocab size, 32,000. Is that just dictionary size?
It's basically the number of unique pieces of language words or word parts it knows. Its linguistic toolkit, if you will.
Okay, so capacity, depth, language range. Now here's where I did a double take.
Yeah.
Inside this technical file, under IDE2 label and label 2IDE, the term non-duality shows up next to label 0.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, I know it's probably just a technical label, right? Maybe for the lowest score in whatever this SPSB thing measures.
That would be the most likely explanation, yeah. STSB is semantic textual similarity.
Right, so how similar two pieces of text are in meaning?
Exactly. The model is trained to output a score or a category reflecting that similarity. Label 0 would just be one of those categories, maybe very dissimilar.
Okay.
The fact that it's named non-duality in this specific file is probably just, well, a choice someone made, or maybe reflects some nuance of that particular training data set, but it's unlikely to be the philosophical concept itself.
Still, quite a coincidence, linguistically speaking.
It is. It highlights how we use language to categorize, though, doesn't it? Even as the other source explores transcending categories.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there are other files mentioned, optimizer.pt, scheduler.pt. we don't need to get lost at those.
Not for this comparison, I think. The config.json gives us the core architecture. The others are about the training process, how it learns, adjusts itself. Super important for AI, but the config shows the structure we're comparing.
Okay, cool. So we've got these two starkly different things. Inner exploration of oneness. And the technical specs of an AI model built to find similarities in text.
So the big question you, the listener, might have is, what's the connection? What can we learn by putting them side by side?
Yeah, what do we learn? The contrast seems huge. Subjective experience versus objective code.
Definitely. But are there any, maybe metaphorical links, parallels?
What do you think?
Well, think about interconnectedness again. Non-duality emphasizes fundamental links.
Right.
You could maybe see a faint echo in the structure of a neural network like FNet. It's literally a web of interconnected nodes and layers.
So connections are key in both, just vastly different kinds.
Precisely. The AI model works because of those connections. Billions of parameters influencing each other to process information, to find relationships in language.
That's actually a really neat parallel. Anything else?
Well, they're both trying to understand and categorize in their own ways.
How so?
The spiritual path explores understanding existence, maybe categorizing experiences to find peace. The AI model is explicitly built to categorize relationships between texts, similar, dissimilar, somewhere in between.
Different goals, different methods, but yeah, a shared theme of making sense of things.
Making sense of the inner world versus the world of language data.
It does make you wonder, looking ahead. The podcast wants to help people find peace through understanding. Could AI ever contribute?
You mean to understanding complex ideas?
Yeah, maybe help us process information or see patterns in philosophy even. Sounds a bit out there, I guess.
It's speculative, for sure. We're not saying AI will achieve enlightenment.
Right, definitely not.
But as these models get better at processing huge amounts of text and finding subtle connections, who knows? Maybe they could offer new perspectives, help synthesize knowledge in ways that spark human insight.
A tool for thought, perhaps?
Potentially, but again, it's crucial not to equate them. We're just looking at the spectrum of how understanding happens, from the deeply personal to the algorithmic.
Okay, so let's wrap this section up for you, our listener. We looked at non-duality, interconnectedness from a spiritual angle.
Via Rupert's podcast discussion.
And contrasted that with the nuts and bolts, the configuration of an AI model designed for semantic similarity.
An FNet model fine-tuned for STSB, to be specific.
And this unusual pairing kind of highlights the different ways we try to grasp the world, right?
Yeah, the ways we humans and now our creations try to make sense of it all, sometimes finding surprising echoes.
So here's a final thought to maybe chew on. As we keep exploring our own minds, our inner worlds.
And also keep building these more and more complex AI models.
Right. Will we find new insights about connection, awareness, understanding itself? Is there some deeper principle linking these quests?
Even an abstract one. That underpins both spiritual seeking and artificial intelligence.
Exactly.
A big question.
It really is. Considering these different approaches together might just give us a richer view of, well, everything, the whole multifaceted way we try to understand reality.
Absolutely. And hey, if any of this sparks something for you, maybe check out Rupert's podcast.
Or dive into the world of NLP and transformer models if the tech side caught your interest. Lots to explore out there.